I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I've learned that I can survive having my entire life turned upside down and still find reasons to hope. I've learned that forgiveness isn't something you do for other people. It's something you do for yourself. David nodded slowly. I've learned that I spent so many years trying to be the perfect son, the perfect husband, the perfect lawyer, that I forgot to figure out who I actually was underneath all those roles. And who are you underneath all those roles? I don't know yet, but I think I'm ready to find out. We reached our cars, parked side by side. For a moment we stood there like two people who had shared a profound experience. Sarah, I know our marriage is over, but I hope we can remain friends. After everything we've been through together, I'd hate to lose you completely. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. I'd like that too, David. I think we both deserve to have good people in our lives. As I drove home to my new apartment, to my new life, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me to this point. 6 months ago, I'd been a woman, planning her 10th wedding anniversary, convinced I knew exactly who I was and where my life was headed. Now I was a divorced woman who discovered that her husband's entire identity had been built on lies, that her marriage had been destroyed by an affair with a woman who turned out to be related to him, and that multiple families had been shattered by a decades-old conspiracy. But I was also a woman who'd learned that she could survive devastating betrayal and still find the strength to forgive. I was a woman who discovered that the truth, no matter how painful, was always preferable to living with lies. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I was excited about that uncertainty rather than afraid of it. 6 months later, David and I stood together in a federal courthouse as the last of the conspirators involved in the 1982 baby switching scandal were sentenced. Thomas Henderson had died 4 months earlier, but he'd lived long enough to see justice begin. David had inherited everything and decided to use his new wealth responsibly. He'd left Morrison and Associates to start his own practice, focusing on family law and adoption rights. He donated millions to genetic research and children's hospitals. As for me, I'd been promoted to head of pediatric nursing at Northwestern Memorial. I'd also started dating again, Dr. Marcus Washington, Amanda Richardson's newly discovered brother. The irony wasn't lost on any of us that two people whose lives had been shaped by the same conspiracy had found each other. Are you ready for this? David asked as we left the courthouse. I think so, I replied. It feels good to know that justice was served. Sarah, I want to thank you for standing by me through all of this, for helping me navigate the truth about who I am, for forgiving me when I didn't deserve it. We both deserve better than the lies we were living with, I said. I'm glad we finally found the truth. That evening, as I sat on my balcony overlooking Lincoln Park, I thought about the anniversary party that had changed everything. The truth had been painful, devastating even, but it had also been liberating. David was learning to build a life based on his authentic self. His adoptive parents were slowly rebuilding their relationship with him, and I had learned that I was strong enough to survive having my entire world turned upside down. The future stretched ahead of me, uncertain but bright with possibility. There would be challenges, but I would face them as my authentic self, surrounded by people who knew and loved the real me. As the Chicago skyline twinkled in the distance, I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast to truth, to healing, to second chances, and to the understanding that sometimes the most devastating moments in our lives turn out to be the ones that set us free. The anniversary party that had ended my marriage had also given me back my life, and for that unexpected gift, I was genuinely grateful. The end. You think someone was covering up affairs, illegitimate children? Or worse, Michael found records of payments made to hospital staff around that time, large payments from families who had reasons to want their children's true parentage kept secret. I thought about Thomas Henderson, about the power and influence he'd wielded in Chicago for decades. Has Michael talked to the other families? Some of them. And Sarah, one of the Switch children, is someone we know. Emma slid a photograph across the table. It showed Dr. Amanda Richardson, the chief pediatric surgeon at Northwestern Memorial. Amanda was Switch too? According to Michael's research, Amanda's biological parents are the Washingtons, the family that owns half the South Side real estate. She was raised by the Richardsons, a middle-class family from Evanston. Does she know? Michael's not sure. But there's something else that affects you directly. Emma pulled out another document. Michael found records of a payment made to Dr. Harold Brennan, the physician who delivered most of these switched babies. The payment came from Morrison and Associates, David's law firm. The words hit me like ice water. David's firm paid the doctor who switched the babies. Not David personally, this was long before he joined the firm, but the firm has been covering up this scandal for 42 years. I felt the familiar anger rising. Do you think David knew? Michael's not sure. It's possible David was kept in the dark, or it's possible he knew and was just a very good actor. I need to talk to David. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Thomas Henderson's name appeared on the caller ID. Sarah, I hope I'm not disturbing you. I was wondering if you might have time to meet today. There are some things I'd like to discuss with you. I agreed to meet him at his office downtown. Henderson Industries occupied the top 3 floors of a skyscraper, and Thomas's office offered panoramic views of Lake Michigan. Thomas looked older than his 65 years, the Huntington's disease already affecting his posture. Thank you for coming, Sarah. I want to apologize for Victoria's role in the destruction of your marriage. How much did you know? I asked directly. About the baby switching? About the cover-up? Thomas's expression became guarded. What do you mean? I mean, did you know that your son hadn't actually died? Did you know he'd been given to another family? The silence stretched between us. Finally, Thomas sighed deeply. Yes, he said quietly. I knew. The admission hit me like a physical blow. You knew David was your son this whole time. Not David specifically, no. I knew that my son had survived, that he'd been placed with a good family. But I didn't know his identity until Victoria told me about their relationship. Why? The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Why let him grow up thinking his parents were dead? Thomas walked to the window. Because I was young and stupid and terrified. Because I was married to someone else when David was conceived. Because his biological mother was a 19-year-old college student who worked at my company. And the scandal would have destroyed both our lives. So, you paid to have the baby switched. You let David's mother believe her baby was dead, and you let the Morrisons believe their baby was dead, all to protect your reputation. David's mother, her name was Jennifer. She was young, unmarried, facing social disgrace in 1982. We thought we were protecting her too. Where is she now? Does she know David is alive? Thomas turned back to face me, his expression heavy with guilt. She died 15 years ago. Cancer. She never knew her son had survived. I felt tears stinging my eyes. Not for myself this time, but for a young woman who died believing her child was dead. Thomas, what you did was monstrous. You destroyed multiple families to protect yourself. I know, he said simply. I've known it for 42 years. And now, with this disease, with death approaching, I want to try to make amends. How? Thomas pulled out a legal document. I've had new wills drawn up. David will inherit everything, the company, the properties, the investments. Does David know? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first, to ask if you think he'll be able to handle it. I don't know David as well as I thought I did, I admitted, but I think he's stronger than any of us gave him credit for. Sarah, there's something else. I'd like you to be part of David's life when he inherits all of this. Not as his wife, I understand that's over, but as his advisor, his friend, his anchor. Thomas, I can't. You're the only person in this situation who doesn't have a hidden agenda. You just want him to be okay. He was right, and I hated that he was right. Despite everything David had done to me, I did want him to be okay. I need time to think about it, I said. Of course. But Sarah, the FBI investigation that your brother is pursuing, I'm going to cooperate fully. It's time for the truth to come out. As I drove home, my phone rang. David's name appeared on the caller ID. Sarah, I just got a call from Thomas Henderson. He said he spoke with you today. He did. David, we need to talk. There are things about your parentage that go deeper than what we discovered 3 months ago. I know, he said quietly. I've been doing some research of my own. Sarah, I want you to know that I never knew who I really was until that night at your parents' house. I believe you, I said, and realized I meant it. Thomas wants to meet with me tomorrow. He says he has things to tell me about my biological mother, about what really happened in 1982. Are you going to go? I think I have to. I need to understand the full truth, even if it's painful. Sarah, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but would you consider coming with me? I don't want to face this alone, and you're the only person I trust to help me process whatever he tells me. The request surprised me, but it made sense. We were both victims of the same conspiracy. Okay, I said. I'll come with you. Thank you and Sarah. I'm sorry for all of it. I'm sorry for hurting you when you deserved so much better. I know you are, David, and for what it's worth, I forgive you. The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise him, but they were. True, the anger I'd carried for 3 months was finally beginning to fade. The next day, David and I sat in Thomas Henderson's office as he told us the full story. We learned about Jennifer Walsh, David's biological mother, a brilliant young woman, working her way through college when she and Thomas began an affair. We learned about the network of corrupt hospital staff and lawyers who had facilitated not just David's switch, but the switches of at least 6 other babies. As Thomas spoke, I watched David process the information. He asked thoughtful questions, showed compassion for his biological mother's situation, and demonstrated a maturity I hadn't seen during our marriage. What happens now? David asked when Thomas finished. Now you have choices to make, Thomas replied, about whether you want to be part of my life for whatever time I have left, about whether you want to inherit my business and wealth, about whether you want to help the FBI bring justice to the other families affected by this conspiracy. I need time to think, David said. Of course. But David, I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'm proud of the man you've become. Your parents, your adoptive parents, did a remarkable job raising you. As we left Thomas's office together, David and I walked in comfortable silence through downtown Chicago. What are you thinking? David asked. I'm thinking that we've both learned more about ourselves in the past 3 months than we did in 10 years of marriage, I replied. And what have you learned? David's eyes swept the room, taking in the anniversary decorations and finally landing on me. For a moment his composed mask slipped, and I saw panic. Sarah, what is this? He asked. It's a surprise anniversary party, I replied, holding up the DNA test results. Though I think the surprises are just getting started. Victoria stepped forward, extending a manicured hand toward my mother. I'm so sorry for the intrusion. I'm Victoria Henderson. David asked me to stop by to discuss urgent business matters. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking. Margaret Morrison, David's mother, stood up with rigid posture. Business matters. Margaret's voice could have cut glass. At a family celebration? David loosened his collar. Mom, This is about the Henderson case. There have been developments that couldn't wait. Really, I stepped forward. What kind of developments, David? The kind that require private dinners at expensive restaurants? The kind that require cancelling? Your anniversary dinner? Emma moved closer to me protectively. Michael positioned himself near the front door, blocking any easy exit. Sarah, I think there's been a misunderstanding, Victoria said smoothly. David and I have been working closely on my divorce proceedings. Your divorce proceedings? Margaret's voice rose an octave. You're married? The colour drained from Victoria's face. David closed his eyes as if he could will himself out of the situation. Recently separated, Victoria corrected quickly, but the damage was done. Let me understand this correctly, my father said in his police detective voice. David missed his anniversary dinner to have business meetings with a married woman, then brought that same married woman to his family's home on his anniversary night. I'm not finished. Robert Patterson's authority filled the room. Sarah, you said you had something to show us? All eyes turned to the papers in my hands. Jessica, David's sister, is a genetic counselor. She's been working on a research project that required DNA samples from family members. David frowned, looking confused. What does that have to do with... She tested your DNA, David. I held up the papers. And she discovered something interesting. You're not actually related to the Morrison family. The silence was deafening. Margaret Morrison sank back onto the couch. William Morrison stared at his son with complete bewilderment. That's impossible, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Jessica ran the test multiple times to be sure. You're not their biological son. In fact, your biological father is someone quite different. I looked directly at Victoria. Your biological father is Thomas Henderson. Victoria's handbag slipped from her fingers. David was staring at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. Thomas Henderson, I continued, the wealthy real estate mogul whose wife you've been sleeping with. David, you've been having an affair with your biological father's wife. The room erupted in chaos. Margaret Morrison let out a sound that was part gasp, part sob. William Morrison stood up so quickly his chair nearly toppled. Emma grabbed my arm. Michael's hand moved instinctively toward where his weapon would normally be. This is insane, David said, running his hands through his hair. Sarah, you're having some kind of breakdown. The breakdown is discovering my husband has been cheating on me, being asked for a divorce on our anniversary, and discovering that my husband's entire identity is a lie. Victoria had bent to retrieve her purse, hands shaking. I need to go. No, my father said firmly. Nobody leaves until we sort this out. Jessica, are you certain about these test results? Jessica stepped forward reluctantly. The DNA doesn't lie. David shares significant genetic markers with Thomas Henderson. The probability of paternity is 99.97%. But how is that possible? William Morrison's voice was barely audible. David is our son. We have his birth certificate. Do you? I asked. Or do you have the records of a baby who was somehow switched? Margaret Morrison was crying now. We tried for so long to have children. When David came to us, he was such a perfect baby. We never questioned. We were just so grateful. Even if this is true, David said, grasping for logical arguments, it doesn't change anything about Victoria and me. We didn't know. Couldn't you? I pulled out my phone. Jessica discovered this 6 months ago, David, around the same time you started working the Henderson case. Around the same time you started having mysterious work emergencies. Victoria spoke up, barely a whisper. Thomas never told me about any children. He said he'd never had kids. Maybe he didn't know either, Jessica said quietly. What circumstances? Emma demanded. How does a baby end up with the wrong family for 42 years? My father provided the answer, his detective instincts piecing together possibilities. 1982. There was a scandal at St. Mary's Hospital that year. Babies being misplaced during a power outage, records getting mixed up. It got covered up quickly. Too many powerful families were involved. Margaret Morrison's sobs grew louder. We were told our baby had died. We were grieving. And then 3 days later, a social worker brought us David, said there had been a mistake with the records, that our baby was alive after all. We were so happy, we never questioned it. And Thomas Henderson's wife at the time gave birth around the same time, William Morrison said slowly. They said their baby died too. Thomas never got over it. The room fell silent as everyone processed the magnitude of what had been revealed. David wasn't just adopted. He was the child of one of Chicago's most powerful families, raised by people who thought they were reclaiming their own dead son. Sarah, David said, his voice hollow, I need you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen. What you intended doesn't matter anymore. I looked around the room. What matters is that you made choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to ask me for a divorce on our anniversary. You chose to bring your mistress to our family's home. I turned to address the room. This was supposed to be a celebration of love and commitment. Instead, it's become a revelation of lies and betrayal. Victoria straightened, her mask slipping back into place. I need to call Thomas. He needs to know about this. The truth. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. The truth is that my marriage is over. The truth is that David has been living a lie his entire life. The truth is that all of us have been manipulated by circumstances beyond our control. Jake tugged on Emma's sleeve. Mommy, why is everyone yelling? And why is Aunt Sarah crying? Emma knelt down to his level. Sometimes grown-ups have problems that are hard to understand, baby. Is Uncle David in trouble? Jake asked. David looked at Jake, then at me, and for a moment I saw genuine pain in his eyes. Yes, Jake, David said quietly. Uncle David is in very big trouble. The truth was finally out, but I realized this was just the beginning. The revelations of this night would have consequences none of us could yet imagine. Chapter 4. Facing the aftermath. 3 months had passed since that devastating anniversary party. I sat in my new Lincoln Park apartment, reading through the final divorce papers that had arrived that morning. The legal proceedings had been swift once David stopped fighting the inevitable. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Coffee in 20 minutes? I have news. The coffee shop Emma had chosen was called Second Chances, which seemed appropriate. She was already seated when I arrived, her expression excited. You look good, she said. Really good. There's color in your cheeks again. It was true. Without the constant stress of pretending my marriage was working, I'd begun to rediscover myself. I've been sleeping better, I admitted. Turns out it's easier to rest when you're not lying next to someone who's lying to you. What's your news? I asked. Emma pulled out a manila folder. Michael's been investigating the St. Mary's Hospital situation from 1982. He found 7 other families, Sarah, 7 other families who were told their babies died, and 7 families who received babies they thought were theirs but weren't. I stared at her. 7? This was bigger than just David. Much bigger. Michael thinks it was a deliberate scheme, not accidental mix-ups. Someone was systematically switching babies, targeting specific families. What kind of families? Wealthy. Powerful ones. Families where a baby's true parentage might be complicated. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. That wasn't the morning sun filtered through our Chicago home's windows as I arranged white roses, the same flowers David had given me on our first anniversary. Today marked our 10th wedding anniversary, and I'd spent weeks planning what I hoped would be a perfect celebration. Morning beautiful, David's voice came from behind me. At 42, my husband still had the commanding presence that had first attracted me 12 years ago. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, blue eyes holding that confident gleam that made him one of Chicago's most successful corporate lawyers. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart," I replied, kissing his cheek. "About tonight," David began, loosening his tie, a nervous habit I'd noticed more frequently lately. "Something's come up with the Henderson case. Rain check on dinner?" My heart sank. "Of course, work comes first, right? You understand, don't you, Sarah? This partnership decision is crucial." After he left, I stood alone in our picture-perfect kitchen. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a successful pediatric nurse at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, reduced to playing the understanding wife while my marriage crumbled. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Emma. "Still on for tonight's anniversary surprise?" The whole family's excited. For weeks, Emma had been planning a surprise party at our parents' house in Lincoln Park. David knew nothing about it. Now, with his sudden work emergency, I'd have to face 30 family members alone or explain his absence. I decided I wouldn't cancel. I'd go alone if necessary. The day passed in a blur of hospital rounds. Little Timmy Rodriguez, a 7-year-old with leukemia, had been asking about my wedding ring. "Nurse Sarah, why do you look sad today?" he asked. "My mama says wedding rings are supposed to make people happy. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings, sweetheart. Maybe your husband just needs to remember why he gave it to you," Timmy said, with profound childhood wisdom. I arrived home to find David's car already in the driveway. Unusual for a night he claimed would be spent at the office. I found him in his study, sitting behind his desk with papers that looked more like personal documents than legal briefs. "Sarah, we need to talk." His voice was controlled, the same tone he used in difficult negotiations. "About what?" "About us, about our marriage." He stood up, casting a shadow across the room. "I've been thinking about this for months. We've grown apart. We want different things." The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. "David, every marriage goes through rough patches. I don't think we can work through this." He pulled out a manila folder. "I've already spoken to my attorney. I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Today? You're asking me for a divorce on our anniversary? I know the timing isn't ideal." "Ideal?" I stood up quickly. "David, we're supposed to be celebrating 10 years together. When was the last time we talked about something other than work schedules? When did we last really laugh together?" I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. He wasn't wrong, but that didn't mean our marriage was over. "Is there someone else?" The question came out as a whisper. David's hesitation was answer enough. "I see." I straightened my shoulders. "And you decided to tell me this today. Why exactly?" "Because I thought it would be easier if we had the weekend to process everything." "I'm going to my parents' house," I said. "Don't wait up." As I drove through Chicago streets toward Lincoln Park, I made a decision. I wouldn't let David's betrayal ruin this night for the people who loved us. I'd find a way to get through the evening with dignity. What I didn't know was that the evening held surprises that would make David's divorce request seem minor compared to what I was about to discover. Chapter 2, Family Secrets Revealed. Surprise! The word erupted from 30 voices as I entered my parents' living room alone. The room fell silent as everyone realized David wasn't with me. "Where's David, honey?" my mother asked, her nurse's intuition picking up on my distress. "He's running. Late. Work emergency." The lie came easier than expected. My father, a retired Chicago police detective, was studying me with the intensity he'd once reserved for suspects. "Sarah, is everything okay?" Before I could answer, my 5-year-old nephew Jake ran in with a construction paper card covered in glitter. "Aunt Sarah, I made this for you and Uncle David." I knelt down to accept the card, my heart breaking as I looked at Jake's stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. Emma approached with protective sister instincts. "Sarah, can I talk to you in the kitchen?" In the kitchen, Emma closed the door and faced me with arms crossed. "Okay, what's really going on?" He asked for a divorce. The words came out flat, emotionless. Emma's face went through shock, anger, disbelief. "Today, on your anniversary?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Something's been off with David for months," Emma continued. "Remember Michael's birthday party? David was supposed to pick up the cake but never showed. Michael saw him at that new restaurant downtown with some woman." My blood chilled. "What woman?" "Blonde, well-dressed, looked younger than you. They seemed close." Michael walked in, still in his police uniform. "What are we whispering about?" He took one look at my face and his expression hardened. "Where's David, Sarah?" Emma filled him in quickly. Michael's face grew darker with each detail. "I knew there was something wrong with that guy," he muttered. My mother appeared in the doorway. "The Morrisons are asking questions. You need to tell us what's happening." I looked at the three people who had always been my safety net. "David wants a divorce. He told me an hour ago. He's probably been seeing someone else for months." There was a knock on the back door. Through the window, I could see David's younger sister, Jessica, holding a manila envelope. "Mrs. Morrison?" I opened the door to find Jessica looking uncomfortable. "Sarah, I need to talk to you, privately." Jessica was 28, a genetic counselor at Rush University Medical Center. "Of course, come in." Jessica sat at the kitchen table and placed the envelope in front of me. 6 months ago, I started working on a research project involving DNA samples from family members. I asked David to participate. I sat across from her, staring at the envelope. "Okay, when I ran his DNA through our database, I found something unexpected." Jessica's hands were shaking. "Sarah, David isn't my brother." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "We don't share the same biological parents. According to the DNA analysis, we're not related at all. That's impossible. You grew up together. I ran the test again using different samples. Same result. Then I tested Mom and Dad's DNA too." Jessica pulled out more papers. "Dad isn't David's biological father. Neither is Mom." "Are you saying David was adopted?" "That's what I thought, but there are no adoption records." "And Sarah." "There's more." Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. "I found a match in the database. David's biological father." She pulled out one final document showing a name that made my blood freeze. Thomas Henderson. Henderson. As in the Henderson case David's been working on? Jessica nodded. Thomas Henderson, the Chicago real estate mogul. The one David's firm represents in that messy divorce case. "Sarah, David's been working for his biological father without knowing it. Does David know?" "I don't think so. I've been trying to figure out how to tell him for months. And there's something else." Jessica hesitated. Thomas Henderson's wife, his current wife, is filing for divorce. The woman he's been seen with around town. She matches the description of someone I think David might know. The pieces were coming together in a way that made me sick. "You think David's involved with Henderson's wife?" "I think your husband is having an affair with his biological father's wife, and none of them know they're related." The kitchen door burst open, and Emma walked in with panic. "Sarah, we have a problem. David just pulled up and he's not alone." Through, the window, I could see David getting out of his BMW, followed by a tall, elegant blonde woman. They were walking toward the front door. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered. "That's Victoria Henderson, Thomas Henderson's wife." In that moment, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. I picked up Jessica's DNA test results and walked toward the living room where 30 people were gathered to celebrate an anniversary that no longer existed. "Sarah, wait," Jessica called. "You can't tell them like this." But I was beyond caring about discretion. David had chosen to bring his mistress to our anniversary party. Now I was going to choose how this story ended, and it was going to end with the truth. Chapter 3. The truth explodes. The living room fell silent as I entered, clutching Jessica's DNA test results. 30 faces turned toward me with expressions ranging from concern to curiosity. The doorbell rang, echoing through the house like a death knell. "I'll get it," my father said. "No, Dad." My voice was steadier than I felt. "Let them come in. Everyone. And should see this." The front door opened, and David stepped inside with his confident lawyer facade firmly in place. Behind him, Victoria Henderson looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Blonde hair, perfectly styled, designer clothes. The confidence that came from wealth and privilege.